What if Joker came into Warhammer 40 Kelvin? The pale-faced man in the purple suit opened his eyes to a sky that bled crimson, pierced by twisted black spires that defied reason. All around him echoed the screams of countless souls, their agony a constant background chorus in this nightmarish city. The air itself tasted of suffering, rich and intoxicating. As the Drukhari torturers circled him with their bladed instruments, their ancient eyes hungry for fresh pain, the man's crimson lips stretched into an impossible smile. These beings had spent millennia perfecting the art of suffering. How could they possibly understand what would happen when their victims began to laugh? In a realm built upon calculated cruelty, what becomes of those who find pain hilarious? The screams echoed through the twisted spires of Camarug, indistinguishable from the thousands of others that formed the city's constant background chorus. But these particular screams carried a different timbre, a note of genuine surprise that cut through the usual despair. In the lowest pit of the Honuli's laboratory, where even the most sadistic of the Dark Eldar rarely ventured, reality had torn open like a festering wound. The tear in space glowed sickly green against the crimson ambient light of the flesh chambers. From within it tumbled a figure, landing with unnatural grace among the scattered bones and surgical implements. He wore a purple suit, now stained with blood not his own, his green hair wild and matted against his chalk-white face. As he straightened, his crimson lips stretched into an impossibly wide grin that would have unsettled even the most jaded Archon. Now that was one hell of a magic trick, the stranger said, dusting off his lapels as he surveyed the nightmarish laboratory around him. His eyes, sharp and calculating despite their manic gleam, took in the fencing tables, the vats of suspended bodies, the intricate tools designed to prolong agony. Love what you've done with place. Very theatrical. 3 Honuli emerged from the shadows, their elongated forms twisted by millennia of self-modification. Their faces were masks of clinical curiosity as they circled this unexpected arrival. Moni hissed the eldest Vrail the sculptor, his voice like nails on glass. But not quite. Something has touched this one, something from beyond the veil. The Joker spread his arms wide in mock humility. Just a clown who took a wrong turn at Arkham. Friends, though, I must say, he surveyed the towering horrors surrounding him. You boys could use a little more colour in your lives. All this doom and gloom must get terribly boring after the first few centuries. Vralith's twisted face contorted further. It knows of time. It speaks as if aware. The monolith reached out with a talent-tipped finger, preparing to pierce the stranger's flesh and taste his essence. The movement was too quick for even the Monuli's enhanced senses to track. The Joker's hand flashed, and suddenly, Vraculith found a crude metal blade buried in his wrist, pinning it to a nearby table. The pain was exquisite, sending a ripple of pleasure through the ancient torturer's nervous system. Now, the Joker admonished, wagging a finger. Didn't your mother teach you to ask before you touch? Oh, wait. His smile widened impossibly further. I forgot. Mommy issues are universal, aren't they? Even as he glanced around, whatever fresh hell this is. The other 2 Monuli moved with predatory grace, their surgical tools raised. The Joker merely laughed, a sound that bounced off the chamber walls with unsettling resonance. There was something in that laugh that gave even these masters of pain pause, a quality that spoke of a madness so pure it had transcended rational understanding. I can see we're going to have so much fun together, the Joker said, producing a small metal canister from his pocket. Let's start with a smile, shall we? The canister erupted with a green gas that filled the chamber, and the Honuli's screams took on a new quality altogether. A sound rarely heard in Camorag, the sound of genuine fear. Word spread through the twisted streets and impossible architecture of the dark city like a virus. A new player had emerged, one who had somehow managed to turn 3 of the most feared homunculi into grinning corpses, their faces frozen in RTU smiles. Despite the evident agony of their final moments, more disturbing still, their souls had not returned to their regeneration chambers. Whatever the stranger had done, it had claimed more than mere flesh. Arkan Vidrathin of the Cabal of the Flayed Hand sat upon his throne of screaming faces, listening to the reports with growing interest. Before him knelt a slith, the serpentine bodyguard's forearms, clutching various weapons as it delivered its message. The creature calls itself the Joker. My lord, the sly hissed. It has taken control of Vraculith's flesh chambers and released half the specimens. The lower districts are in chaos. 3 lesser cabals have already sent emissaries seeking alliance with this newcomer. Vidrain's elongated fingers tapped a rhythm on the arm of his throne. The metallic clack of his poisoned nails against bone created a counterpoint to the moans of the throne's incorporated victims. "And what does this joker demand?" the Archon asked, his voice silken with dangerous curiosity. The slith shifted uncomfortably, its scaled coils tightening. "That is the strange thing, my lord. He demands nothing but an audience. He sent a message saying he wishes to propose entertainment." Vidrain's lips curled into the ghost of a smile. In a city built on the foundation of pain and spectacle, true novelty was the rarest currency of all. After 5,000 years of existence, the Archon had begun to feel the dangerous ennui that eventually claimed all Drukhari, the creeping spiritual starvation that led to madness. Or worse. "Bring him to me," Virathin commanded. "But first, have the scourges circle his location. Prepare the soul traps. If this creature has some method of destroying souls completely, I want it studied." The slith bowed and slithered away, leaving Vidarathan alone with his thoughts and the constant whispers of his throne. A new player in the great game of Camarag was rare enough, one who apparently cared nothing for power, territory or slaves, but only for chaos itself was unprecedented. For the first time in centuries, Vidrathin felt the stirring of genuine anticipation. The Joker stood in the centre of the arena, his purple suit exchanged for a patchwork costume crafted from the flayed skin of several Drukhari. He had painted it in garish colours that clashed violently with the sombre blacks and deep reds that dominated Camarag's aesthetic. Around his shoulders hung a cape made from the facial skin of Vraculith, the monolith's features still locked in that final horrified smile. Above the stands were filled with thousands of Drukhari, their pale faces turned toward this strange spectacle, with expressions ranging from amused disdain to genuine curiosity. In the royal box, Archon Vidrethin reclined on a portable throne, surrounded by his court of sycophants and bodyguards. "Ladies and gentlemen, and whatever else might be lurking in the shadows," the Joker announced, his voice somehow projecting to fill the vast space. "Welcome to the greatest show in whatever twisted dimension this happens to be." A murmur ran through the crowd. The translator implants given to the strange monkey were functioning perfectly, but his manner of speech was bizarre. He addressed the assembled Drukhari nobility as if they were children at a carnival, rather than the most feared predators in the galaxy. "I understand you folks are connoisseurs of pain," the Joker continued, spinning in place with his arms outstretched. "But I've noticed a critical flaw in your methodology. You've been so focused on the physical that you've neglected the psychological, the punchline, if you will." Vidrathin leaned forward slightly, his interest piqued despite himself. "And you believe you can teach the Drukhari about suffering, Mon," he called down, his voice dripping with elegant disdain. "We who have refined it to an art form over millennia." The Joker's smile widened as he looked up at the Archon. "Oh, I don't just believe it, Your Highness. I guarantee it. In fact, I'm willing to bet my life on it." He snapped his fingers, and from the gates at the far end of the arena emerged a procession that caused even the jaded Drukhari to stir. 20 of Virathin's own warriors, true-born nobles of his cabal, marched in perfect unison. Their eyes were wide and vacant, their usual predatory grace replaced by a mechanical precision. "Your boys and girls were kind enough to volunteer for my little demonstration," the Joker explained, spreading his hands innocently as Virathin rose from his throne, fury etched on his aristocratic features. "Don't worry, they're perfectly fine. Physically, at least mentally." The Joker tapped his own temple. "Well, that's the demonstration. Seize him," Vrathan commanded, and a dozen scourges detached from their perches high in the arena, swooping down with guns trained on the intruder. The Joker merely stood still, his smile unwavering as the winged Drukhari surrounded him. "I wouldn't," he said softly. "Not unless you want to see what happens when I say the trigger word." Vidrathin raised a hand, halting the scourges. "Explain yourself, creature." "It's simple, really," the Joker replied. "I've spent some quality time with your warriors. Lovely people. Once you get past all the torture and the superiority complexes, very susceptible to certain chemical combinations, especially when paired with a little psychological reconditioning. Right now, they're awaiting my command." To demonstrate, he turned to the blank-eyed warriors. "Kneel." As one, the 20 Truorn dropped to their knees, their movements robotic and synchronized. A ripple of genuine shock moved through the arena. Mind control was not unknown to the Drukhari, but to see proud Trueborn reduced to such obvious puppetry was unprecedented. These were not the usual broken slaves of the Dark City, but highborn warriors who had spent centuries honing their minds against psychic intrusion and their bodies against physical coercion. The Joker turned back to Vidthin, his grin triumphant. "Now, here's my proposition, Your Majesty. A game. If I can make you admit that I've brought something new to your little torture party, you give me a position of authority in this delightful hellhole. If not," he shrugged, "you can do whatever creative horrors you've been itching to try out since I arrived." Vidyan's eyes narrowed. The creature was clearly insane, but there was a dangerous intelligence behind those manic eyes. For a monkey to have accomplished so much in mere days within, Camarag spoke of capabilities far beyond the usual human livestock. "Very well," the Archon said finally. "You have one opportunity to impress me. Fail, and your suffering will become legendary even by Camarag's standards." The Joker's laugh echoed around the arena, a sound that caused several Drukhari to flinch despite themselves. There was something in it that reminded them uncomfortably of the screams that emanated from the deepest regions of the warp. Perfect. Then let the show begin. The Joker turned to his enthralled warriors and spoke a single word in a language none present recognized. The effect was immediate and horrifying. The 20 Trueborn warriors began to laugh, not the controlled, sadistic chuckle of a Drukhari enjoying another's pain, but a raw, unhinged sound that tore from their throats with increasing violence. Blood began to seep from their eyes and ears as the laughter grew more frantic, their bodies convulsing with the force of it, and then they turned on each other. What followed was a display of violence so sudden and brutal that even the Drukhari audience fell silent. The Trueborn, masters of combat with millennia of experience, applied all their considerable skill not to a strategic battle, but to mutual annihilation. They employed their poisoned weapons, their combat drugs, their ancient techniques, all while continuing to laugh that terrible broken laugh. Within minutes, the sand of the arena was soaked with the dark blood of the Drukhari nobility. 19 bodies lay mangled beyond recognition, their faces frozen in those horrible artist grins. Only one remained standing, a female warrior whose once beautiful face was now a mask of blood and madness, her laughter finally fading as she turned vacant eyes toward the royal box. "The punchline," the Joker announced into the stunned silence, "is that she is Vidrathin's own daughter. And the best part," he gestured expansively at the corpses, "none of them will regenerate. The poison in their systems has corrupted their souls beyond reclamation. Permanent death in a city where death is just an inconvenience. Now that's comedy." In the royal box, Vidarathan stood rigid with fury, and though he would never admit it, a trace of fear. His daughter Selin had been his most prized creation, a warrior of unparalleled skill and cruelty destined to rule the Cabal should Vidrathin ever fall. Now she stood amid the corpses of her peers, her mind clearly destroyed. "Come now, Your Highness," the Joker called up. "I can see you're impressed. Admit it, and we can move on to Act 2 of our little drama." The arena had fallen so silent that the Joker's voice seemed to echo forever through the vast space. The assembled Drukhari looked from the mad human to their Archon, awaiting his response with predatory anticipation. Finally, Vrathan spoke, his voice carrying the weight of cold fury. "You have brought something new into Camarug creature, something that will earn you an eternity of such exquisite pain that you will beg for the oblivion you have granted my warriors." The Joker's smile never faltered. "I'll take that as a yes. And as for the pain," he spread his arms wide. "Why wait for eternity when we have right now?" From within his patchwork costume, the Joker produced a small detonator. Before any of the scourges could react, he pressed it. Throughout the arena, small explosions erupted from beneath the seats of the most prominent Drukhari. Not large enough to kill, but precisely calculated to maim and disfigure. Chaos erupted as the proud and beautiful Drukhari found themselves suddenly scarred and bleeding. The Joker's laugh rose above the screams, a counterpoint of genuine mirth against genuine suffering. "You see," he shouted as scourges swooped down to seize him, "the joke isn't the pain, it's the pride before the fall. It's watching you beautiful, superior creatures realize you're just as fragile as the monkeys you torture." As the scourges dragged him from the arena floor, the Joker locked eyes with Vidrathin. "This is just the beginning, Your Majesty. I haven't even told my best jokes yet." In the deepest dungeon of Virathin's fortress palace, Specially constructed for a prisoner unlike any before, the Joker hung suspended in a web of barbed wire. Each movement caused the hooks embedded in his flesh to dig deeper, a constant source of exquisite agony. His blood dripped into collection basins below, where it was processed for the various toxins and compounds now of great interest to the Monuli. Vrathan circled the suspended figure, examining the Joker's exposed nervous system with clinical interest. The Monuli had performed their art with exceptional skill, keeping the creature alive and conscious while systematically taking him apart to study the unique chemical composition of his brain and body. Remarkable, the Archon mused. Your pain threshold exceeds even our most resilient specimens, and these compounds in your bloodstream, they are unlike anything in our considerable pharmacopoeia. The Joker's face, what remained of it after the High Monul's attentions, still somehow managed that horrific grin. "I told you I was special," he rasped, his voice raw from screaming. "Though I have to say, your hospitality leaves something to be desired." Vidrathin allowed himself a small smile. "You will be studied, Joker. Every aspect of your unique physiology and psychology will be catalogued and replicated. The weapon you represent, this combination of chemical warfare and psychological manipulation, is too valuable to simply destroy." The Joker's laugh was wet with blood. "Weapon? Oh, you still don't get the joke, do you? I'm not a weapon. I'm the punchline." Before Vidrathan could respond, alarms began to sound throughout the fortress. A subordinate rushed in his face, a mask of military discipline that couldn't quite hide his concern. "My lord, we have multiple breaches throughout the lower levels. The specimens in Containment Section Gamma have been released, and the Armanuli report that all their recent experimental subjects are exhibiting the same symptoms. The RTU smile, the uncontrollable laughter, the berserker violence." The Joker's laugh grew stronger. "Did I forget to mention? My blood is the gift that keeps on giving. All those samples you've been so eagerly collecting, each one is a little time bomb of hilarity." Vidian's eyes widened fractionally. The only indication of his shock: contain the affected areas, incinerate the specimens, all of them. "It's too late for that," the Joker said, his voice suddenly stronger. "The joke's already spreading. You see, that's the beauty of it. You can't torture someone who thinks pain is funny. You can't threaten someone who welcomes death as the ultimate punchline." The fortress shook with a distant explosion. The subordinate's communicator chimed with increasing urgency as reports flooded in. "The infection is spreading through the slave quarters, my lord. The witch cult of the Seventh Sorrow reports similar outbreaks in their holding pens, and there are reports of Kabbalite warriors exhibiting symptoms in the outer districts." Vidrathin's composure cracked for the first time. "That's impossible. The compound couldn't have spread so far so quickly." The Joker's laughter had taken on a manic, triumphant edge. "It didn't have to. I've been here longer than you think, my regal friend. Those first Homunuli weren't my first victims, just the first ones you found. I've been seeding your charming little hell city with my special brand of crazy for weeks." Another explosion, closer this time, rocked the dungeon. Dust filtered down from the ancient ceiling. "You should probably run," the Joker suggested helpfully, "though I can't imagine where to. A city built on pain, now filled with people who find pain hilarious. That's what I call a hostile work environment." Vidirathin drew his husk blade, the ancient weapon humming with deadly energy. "You will not destroy what has endured for millennia. Creature Camarug has weathered far worse than your madness." The Joker somehow shrugged despite his bonds. "Maybe, but it's never weathered anything quite like me, and that's the thing about jokes in a place like this. Once people start laughing, it's very hard to make them stop." As if summoned by his words, the dungeon doors burst open. A tide of Drukhari slaves poured in, their faces fixed in those same horrible grins, their eyes wild with a madness that even Kamorag had never seen. Behind them came Kabbalite warriors in the same condition, their discipline shattered by whatever compound now raged through their systems. Vrathan and his guards formed a protective circle, their weapons raised against the oncoming horde. But there were too many, and their fighting style was unlike anything the disciplined Drukhari had trained for. The infected fought with no regard for their own safety, hurling themselves onto blades and into poison shots, all while that terrible laughter echoed from their throats. In the confusion, none noticed as the barbed wire holding the Joker began to loosen, the anchors pulling free from the ancient stone as the fortress shook with increasingly violent explosions. "Now," the Joker whispered to himself as he worked his way free. "Let's really bring the house down." The heart of Camarag, The impossible city that existed both within and outside normal space had descended into unprecedented chaos. Districts that had maintained an uneasy peace for millennia now burned as cabals turned on each other, each blaming the others for the spreading madness. The arenas ran red with the blood of witches who had succumbed to the Joker's toxin, their legendary discipline replaced by berserker violence fueled by uncontrollable mirth. High above the burning spires, a stolen venom skimmer cut through the toxic air of the dark city. At its controls, the Joker surveyed his handiwork with the satisfaction of an artist viewing his masterpiece. His body, partially regenerated thanks to the stimpaks he'd stolen from the Monuli laboratories, still bore the marks of his torture, but his mind remained unbroken. What a beautiful sight, he mused to his unwilling companion. Beside him, bound but conscious, Virathin's daughter, Sylvan, watched the destruction with dead eyes. The Joker had purged enough of his toxin from her system to restore basic function. Though her mind remained fractured, she served as both hostage and guide as the Joker navigated the labyrinthine dimensions of Camarug. "You still don't understand what you've done," she said, her once melodious voice now flat. "The suffering you've unleashed will feed she who thirsts. The soul hunger will only grow worse." The Joker banked the venom around a collapsing spire, admiring how the ethereal flames consuming it, and cast prismatic patterns across the sky. "That's the beauty of it, my dear. I'm not trying to end the suffering, I'm transforming it. Pain with a punchline, agony with a laugh track. Your kind has been doing the same thing for eons, just without my sense of style." Below them, a procession of Monuli emerged from a hidden portal, their twisted forms moving with uncharacteristic haste as they fled the spreading contamination. The Joker dipped the venom lower, following them with predatory interest. "Ah, the doctors are abandoning the asylum. Can't have that, can we?" He reached into a satchel made from flayed Dukari skin and produced a cluster of small grenades. With practiced ease, he dropped them into the midst of the fleeing Monuli. The explosions released not fire, but clouds of sickly green gas that enveloped the ancient torturers. Their screams quickly transformed into that now familiar laughter, their bodies contorting as the toxin rewrote their brain chemistry. Within moments, they had turned on each other with their surgical tools, inflicting their legendary tortures while cackling madly. "See? Much more entertaining," the Joker commented, pulling the venom back up into the sky. "Now, be a dear and point me toward the central power nexus. I think it's time for the grand finale." Salene's eyes flickered with the first emotion he'd seen in them since her partial recovery. Fear. "The central nexus is forbidden to all but the highest archons. The security systems will destroy us before we get within a kilometre." The Joker patted her cheek condescendingly. "That's why we're not going to fight our way in. We're going to be invited." He banked the venom toward the tallest spire visible in the chaotic skyline of Camarug. Unlike the structures around it, this tower showed no signs of the madness consuming the city. It stood pristine and untouched, surrounded by a shimmering field that distorted the very air around it, the Palace of Asdelved. Sylvan whispered, genuine awe breaking through her damaged psyche. "You cannot be serious. The Supreme Overlord will flee your soul for eternity." The Joker's laughter bounced around the confined space of the venom. "Now that sounds like a party I don't want to miss." Besides, he tapped the control panel where a series of stolen security codes glowed. "I have an invitation courtesy of your father's private files." The venom accelerated toward the forbidding spire, transmitting the stolen codes as they approached. For a terrible moment, the security field seemed to intensify, preparing to atomize the small craft. Then, inexplicably, it parted like a curtain, allowing them passage. "See VIP treatment." The Joker guided the venom toward a landing platform extending from the upper reaches of the tower. "Now, let's go meet the man in charge of this asylum." The throne room of Asdrelve, Supreme Overlord of Kamura, defied conventional understanding of space and time. It seemed to extend infinitely in all directions while simultaneously feeling claustrophobically intimate. Reality itself bent around the ancient Drukhari lord who sat upon a throne that incorporated technologies and materials from civilizations long extinct. Vect himself was both more and less than the legends described. His physical form was that of a Drukhari of perfect proportions, neither overtly modified like the Monuli, nor ostentatiously armoured like most Archons. His power required no such obvious displays. The only indication of his unimaginable age was in his eyes wells of absolute darkness, that had witnessed the fall of empires and the birth of gods. Before this embodiment of ancient malice, the Joker stood with the casual insouciance of a man waiting for a bus. Surrounding him were a dozen of Vect's personal guard, their weapons trained on the intruder with unwavering precision. "I must admit," Vect said, his voice surprisingly soft and reasonable, "you have provided a spectacle unlike any Camarag has witnessed in millennia. The chemical compound you introduced to our ecosystem is fascinating." The Joker gave an exaggerated bow. "Always nice to meet a fan of my work, though I have to say, your city could use better review scores. 1 star, would not recommend to tourists." A ghost of a smile touched V's perfect features. "You misunderstand your position, creature. You're not here as my equal, but as my specimen. The chaos you have seen serves my purposes admirably. The weaker cabal will fall, the stronger will emerge more resilient. Camarug renews itself through bloodshed as it always has." "Ah, the I meant for this to happen all along speech." The Joker nodded sagely. "A classic villain move. I respect it. But here's the thing." He took a step forward, causing the guards to tense. "I don't think you did mean for this to happen. I think for the first time in 10,000 years, you're actually surprised." V's expression remained impassive, but something flickered in those bottomless eyes. "Your compound affects only the weak-minded. It spreads through conventional means, requiring physical contact or proximity. Already my Manuli have synthesized a countermeasure. Within days the infection will be contained and studied. Your contribution to our understanding of chemical warfare will be acknowledged in the archives." The Joker's laugh echoed strangely in the impossible space of the throne room. "Oh, that's rich. You really think this is just about the toxin, the gas, the blood, the infection? That's all just Act 1, the setup, the real punchline." He tapped his temple is up here, a joke so funny it breaks reality itself. For the first time, Vect leaned forward slightly on his throne. "Explain. Gladly." The Joker spread his arms wide. "You see, where I come from, I'm something of an idea, a concept given flesh, the embodiment of cosmic absurdity, and the thing about ideas." His grin widened impossibly. "Is that once they're introduced to a new environment, they tend to spread." VCT's eyes narrowed fractionally. "You speak of mimetic infection, psychic warfare. These are known quantities, creature, and they hold no power in Kamura. The shadow of She Who Thirsts protects us from such influences. Not psychic." "No," the Joker corrected. "Something much simpler. You see, you Drukhari have built an entire civilization on the concept of inflicting suffering to stave off your own pain as currency, agony as sustenance. But what happens?" His voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper when the sufferers start to laugh. A subtle change came over the throne room. The guards shifted uncomfortably, though their discipline held. The air seemed to thicken with unspoken tension. "Your toxin induces temporary insanity," Vec dismissed, "a chemical imbalance that will run its course." "The toxin is just a catalyst," the Joker countered. "The real change is philosophical, psychological. When your victims laugh at your torture, when they welcome the pain as part of some cosmic joke, the exchange of energy is disrupted. You can't feed on suffering that's embraced. You can't terrify those who find terror hilarious." V rose from his throne in one fluid motion, his physical presence suddenly overwhelming despite his perfect proportions. "Enough. Your theories are the ramblings of a deranged mind. You will be contained and studied, your compounds extracted, your physical form preserved for further examination." The Joker didn't flinch as the guards closed in. "You still don't get it. I'm already in the system. The joke's already spreading even here in the heart of your power." He looked pointedly at the guards. "How many of them have been exposed to those who've been exposed to those who've heard the joke? How many are already wondering why they never thought to laugh before?" One of the guards made a small strangled sound. It might have been a cough, or it might have been the beginning of a chuckle quickly suppressed. VC's hand moved with blinding speed, and the guard's head separated cleanly from his shoulders, falling to the floor with a wet thud. "Anyone else feeling amused?" Vect asked, his voice deadly quiet. The remaining guards stood at rigid attention, their faces masks of perfect discipline. But the Joker noticed, and surely V did too, the faintest tremor running through their ranks. "Kill him!" V commanded. "Preserve the brain intact." The guards raised their weapons, but before they could fire, a new sound filled the throne room. Laughter. not from the Joker or the guards, but from the shadows behind Vex's throne. A soft, feminine chuckle that grew in volume and madness with each passing second. Sylvan stepped into the light, her face split by that now familiar RTU grin. But there was something different about her. Her eyes were clear, focused, the vacancy replaced by a terrible awareness. "The greatest joke of all," she said, her voice carrying an echo that didn't come from the room's acoustics, "is that he's right. We've been doing it wrong all along." V turned toward her, his face showing genuine surprise for perhaps the first time in millennia. "How did you enter this chamber?" "The wards should have prevented any unauthorized presence," Salvin's laugh intensified. "The wards keep out those who don't belong, but I belong everywhere now. I am the joke that walks." The punchline made flesh with movement too swift for even Vex's ancient reflexes to track. Sylvan was suddenly beside the Supreme Overlord, a curved blade pressed against his throat. The weapon hummed with strange energy, its edge flickering between physical reality and something else entirely. "Where did you get that blade?" Vex demanded, his voice still commanding despite his position. "He gave it to me." Seven nodded toward the Joker. "A gift from his world. He calls it a joke that kills." The Joker watched the tableau with evident delight. "I'd say I'm sorry about the double cross, but honestly this was the plan all along. You see, Vected old boy, I needed a proper straight man for my routine. Someone who just doesn't get the joke right up until the punchline hits." VCT's guards stood frozen, caught between their duty to protect their master and the unprecedented sight of him at another's mercy. For beings who had known nothing but Vect's absolute dominance for millennia, the very concept was almost incomprehensible. "What do you want?" Vect asked, his voice betraying nothing but mild curiosity. "Want?" The Joker looked genuinely confused. That's still thinking like a Drukhari, always some angle, some advantage to be gained. "I don't want anything except the punchline, the big laugh, the moment when it all falls apart." He approached Vect, moving past the paralyzed guards with casual confidence. "You've built an empire on predictable cruelty, on pain with a purpose. But true chaos, true madness, that's a whole different game. And the best part is, once it starts, even you can't stop it." A strange light began to emanate from Seven's blade where it pressed against VC's throat. Not blood, but something more fundamental. A luminescence that suggested reality itself was bleeding where the edge touched flesh. "This is impossible," Vex said, genuine uncertainty entering his voice for the first time. "No weapon can harm me in this place. The laws of physics themselves bend to my will here." The Joker's grin widened to inhuman proportions. "That's the beauty of it. It's not a weapon in the conventional sense. It's a conceptual intrusion. A joke that doesn't just kill the body but rewrites the punchline of existence itself." The light spreading from the blad's edge began to crack the very air around them, reality fracturing like glass under impossible pressure. Vect's perfect features contorted, not with fear, but with a dawning comprehension that bordered on religious revelation. "You are not of this reality," he said, his voice barely audible. "You are something from the warp, a demon or worse." The Joker clicked his tongue disapprovingly, always trying to categorize, to understand. "That's your first mistake. I'm not a daemon or a god or whatever other bogeymen you have in this universe. I'm just a man who saw the cosmic joke and couldn't stop laughing." Around them, the impossible throne room began to distort. Surfaces rippled and colours shifted through spectrums not meant for mortal eyes. The guards dropped their weapons, some clutching their heads, others beginning to laugh that now familiar broken laugh. "What you failed to understand about jokes," the Joker continued conversationally, circling Vected like a predator, "is work by subverting expectations. You expect one thing, you get another. The greater the subversion, the funnier the joke." He gestured broadly at the disintegrating reality around them. And what greater subversion could there be than the Supreme Overlord of eternal torment finding himself on the receiving end, than an entire civilization built on inflicting pain discovering that pain is actually hilarious? Seven pressed the blade harder against V's throat. The light intensified, and with it came a sound like reality itself screaming in protest. "You cannot destroy Kimura," V said, still maintaining his composure despite everything. "It is interwoven with the webway itself. Its fall would create a wound in reality that would make the Eye of Terror seem insignificant." The Joker's laugh turned almost gentle. "Who said anything about destroying it? I'm transforming it. Every joke needs a proper venue after all." He approached Vect until they were face to face. Crimson lips still stretched in that impossible smile. "Here's the punchline. You're supreme. I'm not the virus. I'm the vaccine. Your city was already sick with the most terminal disease of all, predictability." With a nod to Sylvan, he stepped back. "Let's end this first act with a bang, shall we?" Seven drew the blade across V's throat in one swift motion. What spilled forth was not blood, but pure light, blinding in its intensity. Vect made no sound as his physical form began to unravel, dissolving not into component atoms but into abstract concepts. Pain became joy, cruelty transformed into absurdity, immortality fractured into 1,000 moments of perfect, hilarious mortality. The throne room exploded outward, the impossible geometries collapsing in on themselves. The Joker and Selene were thrown clear, tumbling through dimensions not meant for physical traversal. As Chimera convulsed around them, the Joker's laughter echoed through every spire and dungeon, every arena and laboratory, a sound that wormed its way into the minds of all who heard it. The joke had been told. Now came the aftermath. 100 days later, by some arbitrary measurement of time, in a place where time itself was fluid, a procession wound its way through the transformed streets of Camarag. Where once had stood monuments to cruelty and dominance, now rose twisted sculptures of abstract hilarity. Former torture chambers had been converted to theatres, where performances of unhinged comedy played to audiences who laughed until they bled. Leading the procession was a figure who had once been the Dukari noble Sylvan, now transformed into something neither Dukari nor human. Her skin retained its alabaster perfection, but her face had permanently adopted aspects of the Joker's own visage. The smile extended beyond natural limits, the eyes wide with perpetual manic glee. Behind her walked, crawled, and slithered the former elites of Camorric society. Homunuli whose bodies had been reshaped into living jokes, their flesh contorted into impossible geometries that somehow formed visual puns. Archons whose regal bearing now served to emphasize the absurdity of their new existence as prophets of hilarity rather than pain. And at the centre of the procession, carried upon a palanquin made from the remains of V's throne, sat the Joker himself. His form had grown more abstract over the passing days, as if reality itself couldn't quite maintain his existence in this dimension. Sometimes he appeared as the pale-faced man in the purple suit, other times as a grinning shadow with too many teeth, and occasionally as nothing but a laugh that somehow had physical presence. Citizens of New Chimera, he addressed the crowds that lined the processional route, his voice carrying impossible distances. 100 days since our liberation from the tyranny of predictable cruelty. 100 days of exploring the far more interesting landscape of chaotic hilarity. The crowds responded with that now familiar broken laughter, the sound rippling through the twisted spires of the dark city like wind through chimes made of shattered glass. Some doubters remain, the Joker continued, his form flickering between his various manifestations. Some who cling to the old ways, who believe that calculated torture is superior to spontaneous madness. To them, I say, his smile widened impossibly. The punchline is still coming. At his signal, Selene approached the palanquin carrying a crystalline container. Within it swirled an essence of pure darkness, a concentrated shadow that somehow screamed without sound. "The soul of Astubelv," the Joker announced, taking the container and holding it aloft. "Preserved not for torture or consumption, but as the ultimate proof of concept, the straight man to our cosmic joke." The darkness within the container writhed as if in protest or pain. The Joker regarded it with almost tender amusement. "You still don't get it, do you?" he addressed the captured soul. "You never will. That's what makes you perfect. The one being in all of Chimera who absolutely fundamentally cannot understand the joke, and without you," he held the container closer to his face, "it wouldn't be nearly as funny." From the back of the crowd came a disturbance. Warriors pushed their way forward, their armour marking them as belonging to no known cabal of Chimera. At their head strode a figure of imposing presence, his armour adorned with screaming faces and instruments of torture rendered in baroque detail. "Enough of this madness," the newcomer declared, his voice amplified by his helmet systems. "The cabal of the Black Heart will not fall to this infection of insanity. By the authority of the Lord V, I, Archon Xerius, declare this abomination ended." The Joker regarded the interruption with delighted surprise. Now this is unexpected. A plot twist in the third act. How refreshing. He turned to Selene. "Did you know about this little resistance movement, my dear?" Seven's stretched smile never faltered. Of course. What's a good joke without someone who doesn't get it? Xerius raised an ornate splinter rifle, its barrel glowing with dark energy. The countermeasure has been synthesized. Your chemical influence will be purged from Camarag creature and proper order restored. The crowd parted as Xerius's warriors moved forward, each carrying containers of swirling vapour. Where this vapour touched those infected with the Joker's madness, their laughter briefly faltered, their expressions momentarily clearing before confusion set in. Now this is interesting, the Joker mused, watching as the countermeasure began to spread through the crowd. A genuine attempt to rewrite my punchline. I'm almost impressed. Xerius advanced until he stood directly before the Joker's palanquin, his rifle aimed at the creature's heart. Your reign of madness ends now. Lord V foresaw the possibility of an incursion such as yours. Contingencies were prepared. The Joker's laugh was almost gentle. Oh, I don't doubt it. The problem with chess masters, though, is they always assume everyone else is playing the same game. He leaned forward, his face shifting between its various manifestations. I'm not playing chess, Xerius. I'm playing Calvin Ball. With a speed that defied perception, the Joker was suddenly behind Xerius, the container holding VC's soul pressed against the Archon's back. Here's the real punchline, the Joker whispered. The countermeasure works. It absolutely 100% works. Xerius stiffened, confusion evident even through his ornate helmet. Then why are you not attempting to stop its distribution? Because the Joker continued, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. What happens when people who have been laughing uncontrollably for 100 days suddenly remember everything they've done during that time? When the madness clears and they realize the atrocities they've committed in the name of comedy, understanding dawned on Xerius with almost audible impact. The suffering will be beyond calculation. The Joker's laugh intensified. Exactly. The perfect second punchline. First, make them laugh at horror, then make them remember why it wasn't funny. The whiplash alone will feed your soul-hungry goddess for millennia. All around them, the effects of the countermeasure spread through the crowd. The manic laughter began to fade, replaced first by confusion, then by dawning horror. Drukhari, who had participated enthusiastically in the Joker's carnival of madness, now looked at their hands as if seeing the blood on them for the first time. Former torturers who had become the tortured, and then willing participants in new forms of debasement, remembered themselves with sickening clarity. The sound that rose from the crowd was no longer laughter, but neither was it the controlled expressions of pain that had once defined Camarag. It was something new, a wail of existential despair that transcended physical suffering, you see. The Joker gestured expansively at the scene unfolding around them. This is true innovation, not just pain of the body or even pain of the mind. This is pain of the soul, the agony of having been complicit in your own degradation and having found it hilarious. Xerius raised his weapon again, but his hand trembled slightly. You will be destroyed for this. There is no place in reality for a creature such as you. That's where you're wrong, my point-eared friend. The Joker held up the container with vexed soul. There's always place for a good comedian, especially in a universe as grimly serious as this one. Someone has to see the funny side. With a sudden motion, he smashed the container against the ground. VCT's soul, freed from its prison, did not dissipate as expected. Instead, it coalesced into a dark vortex that began to pull at the fabric of reality itself. The very air seemed to scream as it was torn apart, revealing glimpses of something beyond, something that should not be. Whoops, the Joker said with mock contrition. Did I forget to mention that I made a few modifications to his suppress here? A little cosmic rewiring, you might say. After all, if you're going to have a straight man for eternity, best to make sure he's properly prepared for the role. The vortex expanded, consuming Xerius and his warriors before they could retreat. Their screams were not of pain, but of terrible understanding, as if in their final moments they comprehended the true nature of the joke that had been played upon them, and found it unbearable. The Joker turned to Sylvan, extending his hand with theatrical flourish. I believe this is our cue to exit, my dear. Every good performer knows to leave them wanting more. Selin took his hand, her eyes glittering with that same manic intelligence that had first drawn him to her. Where to next? There are so many corners of this universe in need of a good laugh. The Joker's smile widened as they stepped toward the expanding vortex. I hear there's a place called Terror. Very uptight. Lots of rules and ritual and pompous men who take themselves far too seriously. Sounds like my kind of audience. Together they stepped into the swirling darkness, their laughter lingering in the air long after they had vanished. Behind them, Comorig began to fold in upon itself, not destroyed, but fundamentally transformed. The Dark City had always fed on suffering, but now it had been introduced to a whole new spectrum of pain, one laced with the unbearable knowledge of having once found it amusing. In the throne room of the Emperor of Mankind, 10,000 light-years away, and impossibly distant through the warp, a single custodian of the Golden Throne paused in his eternal vigil. For a moment, just a moment, he thought he heard laughter echoing from the immobile form of the Master of Mankind. He dismissed it as impossible, of course. Nothing could penetrate the sanctity of the inner palace. Nothing could reach the Emperor himself. But still, for just a moment he could have sworn he saw the Emperor's withered lips twitch upward at the corners, as if responding to a joke only he could hear.